יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה השם ישמורך מכל רע ישמור את נפשך השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם שיר למעלות אשא עיניי אל ההרים מאין יבוא עזרי עזרי מעם השם עושה שמיים וארץ אל ייתן למות רגליך אל ינום שומרך הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל השם שומרך
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im weekly Torah study. I am Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, and we are gonna dig in a couple of minutes. Let's see, what do I have to say? I don't know. I can't think of anything that I have to say today. I almost wasn't going to do the Torah study because I wasn't feeling well. I ate something last night that didn't agree with me. I don't know, food poisoning or something like that. So I was completely wiped out this morning. But eventually, you know how these things go. Eventually, over time, it got a little bit better. And so I feel good enough to be able to do this Torah study in a coherent enough way. So welcome, everybody. Welcome, Marianana McDonough. Welcome, everybody else who's listening in to the Torah study. And we will try to get cracking with the Torah study. Okay, so we were last in Leviticus chapter 16, and we were speaking about the cleansing of the temple on Yom HaKippurim. We mentioned that Yom HaKippurim is first and foremost not a holiday that has to do with gaining personal atonement or personal forgiveness. It's first and foremost a holiday for gaining atonement for Israel for having inadvertently, hopefully inadvertently, sullied up the temple, tabernacle / temple during the previous year. That's what it first and foremost is about. So since we didn't get to it last week, what I would like to do is go back to the beginning of chapter 16 and just read through with little to no translation and little to no commentary on up until where we got. So I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to read through in the Hebrew, and you guys can follow along in the English or whichever language you prefer, such as Serbian. And thank you, Marianana, but it's really not a big deal. It's one of those little things. But thank you for your thoughts. Okay, so we're doing window, and we're doing this, and boom. There we go. So let me switch over to here to Leviticus 16. Okay, follow along. Shabbat Shalom, Mauricio. Shabbat Shalom. And follow along, and we're going to start right at the beginning of the chapter. וידבר יהוה אל משה אחרי מות שני בני אהרון בקרבתם לפני יהוה וימות. So we know that back in Leviticus chapter 10, the two firstborn sons of Aharon, Nadav and Avihu, they brought unsanctioned incense, and they were put to death. And that's the context for how you're supposed to enter into the holy areas, and how you're supposed to, or this day that atones for any mistakes such as those. That was a pretty serious mistake, so they were put to death. But this is the day that is going to atone for any inadvertent mistakes. Verse 2, Wayomer Yahweh el Moshe, Daber el Aharon Achicha, Wa'al Yavo B'chol Eit el HaKodesh Mibeit LaParochet, El Pnei HaKaporet, Asher al Ha'aron, V'lo Yamuth. Okay, so Aaron is not allowed to go inside into the area of the Holy of Holies, because that's where God lives. That's where the glory, the Kavod Yahweh, lives, right? And we've spoken a lot. We've studied a bunch about the glory of God, the Kavod Yahweh, and that's where the Kavod Yahweh, ultimately, that's its resting place on this planet. Verse 3, Bezot Yavo Aaron El HaKodesh, Bepar ben Bakar lehata'at wa'ayal le'olah. So if he's going to go in, he's going to bring a sin offering and a fully burnt offering. Verse 4. Second, please. Verse 4. K'toned bad chodesh yilbash u'mechnaseh bad yi'u al b'saro ובאבנית בד יחגור ובמצנפת בד יצנוף בגדי קודש הם ורחץ במים על את בשרו ולבשם. So he's not wearing his Kohen Gadol, his full getup. He's wearing the clothes of a lay Kohen, which are all white and which don't have things such as the Choshen Mishpat, the breastplate of judgment, the ornament and Tumim, the mitznefet, which is the special Kohen Gadol's turban, the tzitz, the gold diadem, which says holy to Yahweh, etc. He's wearing the lay Kohen's dress. I think it's a matter of being humble at this point. He's going in and he's trying to get forgiveness for his household, for his family, for the Kohanim, and for all of Israel for any advertent transgressions of the rules of the systematic, quote unquote, cultic worship of Yahweh, right? Okay, verse 5. Adat b'nei Yisrael yikach shnei se'irei izim v'chat'at wa'ayel echad le'olah. So now there's going to be two goats, which are going to be used as a sin offering. We know what happens to one of them. That's the scapegoat. Wa'ayel echad le'olah, and along with that, a burnt offering. So the burnt offering is kind of accompanies everything, as we've seen, or accompanies many other sacrifices. It's like the, hey, we're going to do a sacrifice kind of offering, right? It's to get the ball rolling kind of thing, or to, it's the big kahuna that accompanies all other offerings. Okay, no pun intended. Kahuna, Kohen. Verse 6, Vayikriv Aaron et parachatat asher lo, wachiper ba'ado ba'ad beito. So he sacrifices the sin offering that is meant to atone for he and his household, which means the Kohanim. Verse 7, ולקח את שני השעירים, והעמיד אותם לפני יהוה פתח אוהל מועד. So now he's taking the two goats, which are the sin offerings for the children of Israel. Verse 8, ונתן אהרון על שני השעירים גורלות, גורל אחד ליהוה וגורל אחד לעזאזל. So lots are going to be drawn. One is sacrificed to Yahweh, one is to Yahweh, and one is to Azazel, which means somewhere out in the desert. And we don't know exactly what Azazel means. Although we did notice that the word Azazel contains the letters Ayin Zion, which are Ayz, which is the name for goat. So the goat place, the goat going, we really don't know. Verse 9, Wa'ikriv Aaron et hasa'ir sher Allah allow hagoral liyahweh wa'asa chatat. And so the one that was chosen to be a sacrifice to Yahweh is then sacrificed, Wa'isa'ir, or will be sacrificed, Wa'isa'ir asher Allah ala hagoral la'azazel yamod chai lifnei Yahweh. And that one which was chosen to go to Azazel. And by the way, in modern Hebrew, if you say Lech Azazel, it means that's the modern Hebrew slang way of saying go to hell. Okay, go to hell, Lech Azazel. Yeah, Amod Chai. So that one remains alive, and it's placed before Yahweh, which means in the temple courtyard. Lechaper Rav Lishloach. I'm sorry, Lishalach Oto LaAzazel Hamidbara, in to gain atonement through it, and then to send it off into Azazel, whatever that means, off the cliff in the desert, although it doesn't mean off the cliff. Again, we don't know what it means. Excuse me for 1 second. One second. Down here. A little bit hot. Okay. So remember, for the priest, there was one sin offering. So now these are the details of sacrificing the sin offering. It's too cold. It's too hot. It's too cold. Too hot. Too cold. Too hot. Too cold. Reverse squares law. Okay. So Yukriv Aaron et parchatat. So Aaron offers. So Aaron then offers the bull of the sin offering, asher lo, and he sacrifices and he atones for himself and for his household. And then he slaughters the bull sin offering. V'lakach melo machta gachalei esh me'al hamizbeach minifnei Yahweh. Melo chafnav ketoret samim daka wa'ivi mibet laparochet. And then he takes fire, or he takes coals off of the altar of sacrifice, and then he fills up his hands with, he takes a double handful of official incense, and then brings it inside into the tent of meeting. Verse 13, Unatan et hakatoret ala esh lifnei Yahweh, kisa anan hakatoret et hakaporet asher ala edut v'lo yamut. So basically what he does is he lights this incense in that incense censer, that incense pan, and then he walks into the Holy of Holies area where the Ark of the Covenant is, and where the cover of the Ark of the Covenant has the cherubim between which the glory of Yahweh rests. And so when he walks in there, the smoke, the cloud from the burning incense covers the area of the Holy of Holies, covers the area between the cherubim, and the glory of God cannot be seen directly, because we know that anyone who sees the glory of God will die. You cannot, lo yoreni adam v'chai, a person cannot see the glory of God and remain alive. Okay? And when we studied the glory of God, we saw it was always covered in some kind of cloud. It was always ensconced in some kind of cloud. It could never be looked at directly. Okay? Verse 14, Walakach midam apar, hiza be'etzbo al pnei ha'kaporet, kedma wa lifnei ha'kaporet, hayasesh min adam be'etzbo. So he takes the blood, he takes some of the blood from that, the sin offering, the sin offering of the bull, and sprinkles it in the direction of the ark cover. Okay, maybe on the ark cover. I would think in the direction of. Okay, now verse 15. ושחט את שעיר החטאת אשר לעם ויביא את דמו אל מבית הפרוכת. So now he takes one of those two goats. Remember, one goat is to Lazazel, goes out into the desert, and this is the other one that's a sin offering for now. He's not atoning for himself and his own household for the Kohanim. Now he's atoning for all of the people of Israel. Damon beit la parochet, yasad damo kasher asa ledam apar wahiza oto al kaporet lifnei kaporet. So it's very clear on the ark cover and before the ark cover. Let me just go back up here for a second. ולפני על פני הכפורת קדמה ולפני הכפורת יזה 7 פעמים מן אדם באצבעו. So it seems that he sprinkles it 7 times on the ark cover. Remember, the ark cover is it's basically Yahweh's throne. You could think of it that way. It's the seat of the throne of Yahweh's glory, and the ark cover is it's the most expensive part of the entire tabernacle setup. Let's just look at it again. Okay, Ark of the Covenant. Because it's made of pure gold. There is one other thing in the entire temple setup that's made of pure gold, and that is the menorah. Okay. But the menorah is not in the Holy of Holies area. So within the Holy of Holies area, the inner sanctum, this Ark of the Covenant, so the ark itself is made of acacia wood, and then it's overlaid with gold. But the ark cover is made of a single block of gold, or a single lump of gold, a huge lump of gold that is then beaten into the shape of the ark cover and the cherubim. So it is the most exquisite and the most expensive piece of furniture, in the that's usually what they call it, in the entire tabernacle setup, and it is the seat of, it's basically Yahweh's throne. It's the seat of Yahweh's glory in this world. Okay, so taking blood and sprinkling it on the ark cover is a little bit, I don't know, I never got that. Because there are times where also you're supposed to sprinkle it on the parochet. The parochet is the curtain that separates. We saw this in the laws for the sin offering back in Leviticus 4, I think it is. And you're supposed to take the blood from the sin offering and sprinkle it on the parochet. The parochet is the curtain. So, and it's an exquisite curtain. So I don't know. This never made sense to me. But I guess maybe the idea is, as we see it, Shabbat Shalom Wopil, his name. I think the idea is this. We see a lot of times that when atonement is being asked for or when atonement is being granted, something in this world has to suffer, whether it's an innocent animal that's slaughtered, right? For us to gain atonement, we have to slaughter innocent animals, or whether in this case it is the ark cover, this exquisite piece of gold that is defaced, basically, or that is, I would say defiled, because that's a loaded word in what we're talking about here, but it's defaced by having blood sprinkled on it. So something in this world has got to suffer. It's a kind of muhashi. How do you say this in English? It's a kind of visceral way of showing people that there are consequences to sin. There are consequences to mistakes. There are consequences to doing wrong. And Yahweh, in his mercy, never exacts the full consequences from our hides, right? Hence the animal sacrificial system, which I personally think will be discontinued in the future. That's another story, not for here, but I believe it will be discontinued in the future. But in Yahweh, in his mercy, he never extracts the full punishment from us. So instead, he extracts it from something else, an innocent animal. Yes, it's a shame that an innocent animal has to die. It's horrible, especially for us animal lovers. And I know Marianana Miknana is an animal lover. I'm an animal lover. But I guess better them than us is kind of thinking, right? It's a way of, well, we could stay alive, and now we could see viscerally the effect that our bad deeds had on our mistakes, and our bad deeds had on another living creature who didn't even deserve it. Okay. All right. So, so the blood is sprinkled on the ark cover and before the ark cover 7 times each. Verse 15. So that was a sin offering for the priest. That was the bull. Now remember, there are 2 offerings or 2 goats that are brought for the people. One is going to be sacrificed as a sin offering, and then the other is going to be sent off into the desert to Azazel. This is now verse 16. והביא את דמו אל מבית לפרוכת ועשה את דמו כאשר עשה לדם הפר ויזע אותו על הכפורת לפני ולפני הכפורת. So it's the same thing. The goat that is the sin offering for all of the people is sprinkled 7 times on the ark cover and 7 times before the ark cover. Verse 16, וכיפר על הקודש טומאות בני ישראל. And this is really, I think, right here, a key verse, a key couple of words. And this, in order to atone on the holy area, on the sanctuary, from the ritual impurities, from the cooties of the children of Israel. What does this mean? This exactly tells us what this whole idea of this entire ceremony, this entire ritual on the 10th day of the 7th month, on Yom HaKippurim, is all about. It's to gain atonement for any mistakes, hopefully inadvertent and maybe deliberate in the case of some people, that the children of Israel might have done with regards to not not keeping carefully not keeping carefully the sanctity of the tabernacle area or of the sanctuary, meaning perhaps coming in there while being in a state of ritual impurity, or not correctly performing one of the sacrifices, or any of the other or any other violation of the very specific rules and laws that Yahweh laid down with regards to the ritual systematic worship of him, or the systematic service of him. But basically it says Tuma'ot b'nei Israel. So the real key here is sullying up the sanctuary. Remember, we said that it doesn't matter whether you're in a state of ritual impurity or a state of ritual purity. When you're outside of the sanctuary, when you're outside of the province of the temple / tabernacle, you could be ritually impure, you could be ritually pure, it doesn't matter. But if you're in the province of the sanctuary, if you're in the province of the tabernacle, you must be in a state of ritual purity. We've learned extensively the various laws regarding the states of purity, ritual purity, how you enter a state of ritual impurity, of getting the cooties. We saw different things, such as a woman giving birth, such as the release of semen from a male, or the menstrual, the release of menstrual blood and other goop from the female. That is the technical term, goop, and so on and so forth. Getting sodaat, which again is poorly translated as leprosy, and so on and so forth. Okay. So if you're in a state of ritual impurity, you're not allowed to come within the province of the temple. And if you do, you have now sullied up the temple. You've sullied up God's sacred house, which is to be kept immaculately clean, just like you wouldn't trudge into the White House if you had dog crap on your shoes, unless of course Joe Biden were president, which I think some of the people here think he's actually dead. So anywho, so that's the idea. This whole ritual is meant to atone, is meant to gain forgiveness from Yahweh and create a clean slate, wipe out the inadvertent sins, and start a clean slate for the children of Israel with regard to any mistakes they may have done in the past year, which may have inadvertently, or perhaps in some cases on purpose, without the rest of the people knowing about it, sullied up the temple province with ritual impurity. Okay. And then it says, and also of their crimes or their sins regarding all of their crimes regarding all of their sins, or their transgression regarding all of their sins. That's pretty vague. So that may include now all of the other stuff, such as speaking bad about your neighbor behind his back, spreading gossip, cheating, stealing, all those lovely things, or it might just be a way of reiterating or maybe expanding a little bit more the idea of the ritual transgression of the laws of the systematic sacrifice of Yahweh. Okay. וכן יעשה לאוהל מועד השוכן איתם בתוך תאומתם. And this is what shall be done for the tent of meeting that dwells with them among their ritual impurity, among their cooties. So in other words, they're going to get all cootied up. Okay, they might bring some of those cooties into the Ohel Moed, into the Ohel Moed is technically the tent that is in the sanctuary or that's in the tabernacle courtyard. But it's where all the holy stuff is, okay? And so they may have they are going to be ritually impure. They're going to be doing their usual stuff. Women are going to have their menstrual cycles. Men are going to release semen and all those lovely things that humans do in the course of their daily life. And so we want to make sure that those cooties don't spread to the Ohel Moed, to the tent of meeting, okay, to the tabernacle area. Verse 17, וכל אדם לא יהיה באוהל מועד בבואו לכפר בקודש עד צאתו, לכפר בקודש עד צאתו וכפר בעדו ובעד ביתו. One second here, וכל אדם לא יהיה באוהל מועד בבואו לכפר בקודש עד צאתו, כפר בעדו ובעד ביתו ובעד כל קהל ישראל. Okay, so I don't know if we got to this part. I'm going to start here. Okay, so v'chol adam. So literally, what it says is no person or every man or no man shall be. It says literally in the tent of meeting, but no man is ever allowed into the is never allowed into the tent of meeting. The only ones who are allowed into the tent of meeting are the Kohanim, and if I'm not mistaken, only the Kohen Gadol, perhaps the Kohen Gadol. Yeah, I think only the Kohen Gadol is allowed anytime into the Ohel Moed. So I think what this means is in the temple sanctuary. That's my guess. We could look at some commentary on it. Okay. When he comes, meaning when the Kohen Gadol comes to gain atonement for the sanctuary until he comes back out, and in doing so, he will have gained atonement for himself and for his household, meaning for the rest of the Kohanim, and all of the congregation of Israel. Let's get a little commentary on this. So this is Leviticus chapter 16, verse 17. And let's bring up our usual. Robbie Alter. This is Leviticus 16. Line 68. Let's go to the commentary section. And we are in verse 17. And he doesn't have commentary there, but he does have commentary for verse 16. So let's just reread verse 16. So he shall gain atonement for the sanctuary, from the cooties of the children of Israel, and from their crimes, and all of their sins. So he shall do for the tent of meeting, or to the tent of meeting, that dwells with them, among them, that dwells with them in the midst of their impurities, in the midst of their cooties. All right, so Robert Alter says about this, he shall atone over the sacred zone. This clause is the conceptual heart of the entire atonement ritual, right? And that's exactly what we said, right? I like Robert Alter. He agrees with me. Smart guy. Okay. During the year, the accumulated sins and transgressions and physical pathologies and inadvertencies of the Israelites have built up a kind of smog of pollution. He's always very poetic. That threatens the sanctity of the tent of meeting, the holy of holies within it, by implication for later times, the sanctity of the temple. Right. That's why, and he says the tent of meeting, and by implication for later times, the temple. That's why I say tabernacle temple. I use it interchangeably, because the tabernacle later gained a permanent home, and that was the Beit Yahweh, that was the house of Yahweh, the temple. Okay, this elaborate rite of purgation scrubs everything clean of impurity, making the sacred zone cultically. Remember, cultically just means ritually viable for another year. Again, evidence abounds of annual rites for cleansing the temple in Mesopotamian culture that may well have served as precedent for what we have here. Later Jewish tradition would transform this ritual for the purgation of a physical miasma of pollution into a process of spiritual repentance and atonement. So this is very important. This is how the rabbis changed Yom HaKippurim. I'm going to read the sentence again. Later, Jewish tradition would transform this ritual for the purgation of a physical miasma. I don't know what miasma means. I think I know what miasma means. I think it means like a cloud or a whatever it means if you get it from the context. A physical miasma pollution into a process of spiritual repentance and atonement. Okay, so the rabbis took the focus away of Yom Kippurim, away from the tabernacle, away from the temple. Of course, the proponents of the rabbis would say that's because the temple was destroyed. Of course, the temple was destroyed. I look at it a little bit differently. I think that the rabbis deliberately wanted the temple destroyed because they wanted to take over the nation, and they couldn't do it while the temple was around, because as long as the temple was around, who was in control? It was the Kohanim. It was in the Second Temple period times. It was the Hashmonaim. It was the Sadducees, and they saw the Sadducees, the Hashmonaim, as maybe they saw them as corrupt. Maybe they were corrupt, but they were also corrupt. But at any rate, they saw them as a threat to their, or a roadblock. No, what's the word I'm looking for? An obstacle to their ability to seize power within the nation. I think they were just a bunch of power-hungry scum, if you ask me. And I think they actually did many things to put in process, or to put in flow things that led to the ultimate destruction of the Second Temple. I believe that was their ultimate goal. That's what they wanted, because they wanted power. They wanted the power over the nation for many reasons, which we won't even get into right here. And the Sadducees, the Hashmonaim, the temple was an obstacle, was an impediment to their taking over. Of course, later they would cry these horrible crocodile tears over the destruction of the temple. To this day, Tisha B'Av, they sit and they cry these crocodile tears. If you ever go to the Kotel on Tisha B'Av, you'll see these Karaites there who, I mean, the irony. Okay, we'll get into this. All right, here we go. I'm going to take off the gloves a little bit. So if you go to the Kotel, the Western Wall on Tisha B'Av, you'll see these Haredim sitting there crying these crocodile tears, almost forcing it. You should go there and see it. They're like, oh, yeah. It's like so forced. It's like stupid, It's pathetic, actually. It's actually infuriating. I don't even want any part of their ritual. So they're crying these forced crocodile tears over the destruction of the temple. And what's the irony? While they dress in this ridiculous, 17th, 18th century Polish garb, wearing long black coats, sometimes even when it's 100 degrees Fahrenheit outside in Jerusalem, they won't even go up onto the Temple Mount. They'll sit there at the Kotel crying over the destruction of the temple, and they won't even go up onto the Temple Mount because their rabbis have told them that it is illegal to go on the Temple Mount because they're not in a state of ritual purity for the red heifer, etc. I won't get into it now. And so they sit at the Kotel crying these crocodile tears over the destruction of the temple, when they're the last ones in the world who really want the temple rebuilt. Because if they wanted the temple rebuilt, then at least what they would do is go up onto the top of the Temple Mount and show the Israelite, the Jewish presence on the top of the Temple Mount. At any rate, it's crazy, man. It's just sick. It's no wonder sometimes why this nation receives the punishments that it does, including October 7th. And I always like to point out that when I say things like Israel the Jews got the Holocaust because they deserved it, or Israel got the October 7th because it deserved it. I always need to point out that that doesn't mean that everyone who died on October 7th deserved to die. Just like when we sin and innocent animals are sacrificed, it doesn't mean that those innocent animals deserve to die. What it means is that Yahweh is angry at the nation, or in the case of the animals, right? He's taking out our sins on innocent creatures. Well, it's kind of the same thing. When Yahweh gets angry, he wipes away the good with the bad. His anger gets so furious it bursts out. It's like, I think someone once described it as, I know who described it. He's actually a Christian pastor. He's excellent. And yes, now I need to, of course, point out that I am in no way, shape, or form Christian, Messianic, or anything along those lines. But I do listen to Christian content sometimes, because I find some of their takes on things when they're speaking about the Old Testament to be very good. And so this particular Christian pastor, he's since passed away. He's pastored away. His name is David Pawson. I highly recommend looking him up on YouTube. And I think he's the one who describes God's wrath to, it's like he's English, so he talks about boiling milk. So I guess they boil milk for their stupid tea, right? All my British friends out there. Yes, they boil milk like a bunch of morons. They boil milk for their tea. I mean, come on, what kind of idiot adds milk to their tea? Right, Daniel? I don't think Daniel's here. Okay, anyway, just teasing, a little teasing of my British friends. Any rate, so he compares it to boiling milk, that if you let milk simmer, it will just simmer, and if you don't watch it, then suddenly the whole thing will overflow. And he compares Yahweh's anger, the anger of Yahweh, to that Yahweh's anger can simmer for a while. It'll simmer. You have plenty of time. He's very patient. You have time to calm it down, to turn down the flame. But if you don't, it will suddenly boil over. And when it boils over, man, watch out. Okay. It's like when dad comes home and mom says that the kids did such and such and such, and then dad is on the warpath, right? So if you don't want to get Yahweh to the point where he's, because then he just starts, flicking off heads, I guess literally and figuratively, right? And that's when innocent people start dying. The innocent die together with the guilty, and that's what happened in the Holocaust. That's what happened on October 7th. It's the sins of the nation that lead to Yahweh's reaction in that respect. And once you get Yahweh to that point, then all bets are off. Okay, people start dying. They can be, randomly, so to speak. His anger is so fierce at that point. It's almost like he can't control it, and innocent people as well as guilty people die. It's a whole philosophical talk, or which we won't get into right now. It's complicated, it's complex, but that's essentially the idea. Okay, so how do we get into that? Oh, right, I forgot. Doesn't matter. Let's go on. Leviticus 16. Okay, so we read Robert Alter's commentary. Okay. We read Robert Alter's commentary, and now we are on verse 17. All right, we read this already. Okay, so let's just look at Robert Alter's translation on that. That's verse 17. I mean, the translation is pretty straightforward, and he doesn't have commentary. But I just want to see how he translates it. Anyway, and no person shall be in the tent of meeting when he comes into the sacred zone to atone until he goes out, and he shall atone for himself and for his household and for the whole assembly of Israel. Okay, let's go on to verse 18. El HaMizbeach. So this is now the Kohen Gadol, right? He's doing this ritual. Okay, he's gone into the Holy of Holies. He sprinkled the blood. One second. So he's taken the blood of the goat. 2 goats, one to the Azazel, one is sacrificed to Yahweh. He's taken the blood of the goat that was sacrificed as a sin offering to Yahweh. He's now brought it into the Holy of Holies. He's sprinkled it 7 times on the ark cover, 7 times in front of the ark cover. to gain atonement for the children of Israel, for the cooties and other stuff. And no one should be, it says no one should be in the Ohel Moed, but no one's ever in the Ohel Moed. So I think what that means is nobody's in the temple courtyard. I don't know. I could be wrong about that one. That's why I wanted to get some commentary. If we had more time, we'd look up some more commentary, but I just want to forge ahead a little bit. Verse 18, Yetza el HaMizbeach. So now he comes out of the tent of meeting. I guess it does mean the tent of meeting itself, but who else would be in there? I don't know. Doesn't make sense to me, but I'm not going to track it down right now. Verse 18, Yetza el HaMizbeach. So he comes out to the altar of sacrifice. Let's bring up our map of the tabernacle. Our famous map of the tabernacle that we use every week. That's the one we use. Come on. Okay, so it comes out back to this area here where the altar of sacrifice is. Asher lifnei Yahweh, and we've seen this phrase Asher lifnei Yahweh before. It's a phrase, it's an idiom or a euphemism, not a euphemism, but an idiom which means basically in the temple courtyard. Okay. V'chiper alav, v'rakach midam apar, midam ha'seir. So now he's going to atone for himself. So he's atoned for the for the Kohanim, for his household. He's atoned, actually for himself and his household. He's atoned for all of the children of Israel. So for himself and his household, that was the bull, the bull as a the bull sin offering, and for the children of Israel, that was the goat sin offering. And now he's going to atone for himself. And I'll explain what I think that means in a second. Midam ha'seir. So he takes the blood from the bull and the goat that he had just brought in and sprinkled on the Ark of Natan al kornot hamizbeach saviv, and he rubs them on the horns of the altar all around. So the altar has horns. Can't see it here. Okay, but the altar has like these 4 horns sticking out of the 4 corners, and he rubs the blood from both of those sin offerings onto the altar of sacrifice. And he sprinkles upon the altar of sacrifice from that blood with his finger 7 times. So I guess 7 times with the bull blood, 7 times with the goat blood. And in doing so, okay, now we got it. And in doing so, he will purify it. He will get it back to its state of ritual purity. In other words, will atone for all of the cooties that may have inadvertently come in contact with it during the past year. And he sanctified me to Israel from the ritual, from the cooties, from the ritual impurities of the children of Israel. So okay, I got it. So I'm sorry. So I translated this a bit incorrectly. Let me retranslate this. So he's going to go back. He's now coming out of the tent of meeting. Tent of meeting. This is the tent of meeting. He's going back out to the altar of sacrifice. Asher lifnei Yahweh, which is in the courtyard. Chiper alau, and he's going to atone for it, not for himself, for it. Meaning, he's going to atone for the altar of sacrifice. So he's now atoned for the tent of meeting, for the sanctuary, the holy area, the holy of holy areas, the ark of the covenant, the cover of the ark of the covenant, where the glory of Yahweh dwells. Now he's going to come back out and he's going to atone for the altar because maybe it got cootied up, maybe it had contact with ritual impurity during the past year. Okay, and so he's going to, by sprinkling the blood from each of the sacrifices, the 7 times from the bull, the bull blood, which represents atoning for himself and his household, the Kohanim, and 7 times from the goat, representing atoning for all of the children of Israel. Then he atonement for himself, his household, and all the children of Israel with regards to any inadvertent cooting up of the ark of sacrifice out here in the courtyard. Okay. Alrighty. Now we get to the scapegoat. I believe we did do this before, but no big deal. We're going to finish this chapter today, and next time we'll go on to Leviticus 17. So if we go back a little bit, never matters. We just learn more this way. Give me 1 second, please. One second. One second. Un segundo, por favor. Or in Portuguese, un segundo, obrigado. Faz favor. Okay, so yeah, just 1 second. Very quickly. Okay, so that. Alrighty. So where were we? The scapegoat. Verse 20. وخلا מכפר את הקודש ואת אוהל מועד ואת המזבח ויקריב את השעיר החי. I'm confused. What am I missing here? 1 second. Did I miss a goat? Missed a goat. Okay, let me just translate it first, and then I'll go up and check myself. Verse 20. So he finishes when he finishes atoning for the sanctuary, which in this context means the Holy of Holy areas, that the Ark cover where the Ark of the Covenant is, with Oil Moed, and that means the entire tent of meeting. This guy over here. So sometimes it'll say Holy of Holies, sometimes it'll just say Holy, but you have to know from the sanctuary, from the context, what it's talking about. Clearly, the context here is it means the whole. It's the Kodesh is the Kodesh Kedoshim, it's shorthand for the Holy of Holies, and for the tent of meeting, and for the Ark of Sacrifice, not Ark of Sacrifice, the altar of sacrifice. Then he sacrifices the living goat. Okay, so I think I left out one goat. Let me just go back up here for a second. Give me 1 second here. Count to 100 to yourselves, please. חטאת, והיה לך לעולה, הקריב אהרון את פר החטאת, אשר לו וכיפר בעדו ועד ביתו, ולקח את שני השעירים העמיד אותם לפני יהוה פתח אוהל מועד. Verse 8, ונתן אהרון על שני השעירים גורלות, גורל אחד ליהוה וגורל אחד לעזאזל. Verse 9, והקריב אהרון את השעיר אשר עלהו הגורל ליהוה ועשה חטאת. Verse 10, והשעיר אשר עלה עליו גורל לעזאזל יעמוד חי לפני יהוה ולכפר עליו לשלח אותו לעזאזל המדבר. Verse 11, הקריב אהרון את פר החטאת אשר לו וכיפר בעדו ובעד ביתו ושחט את פר החטאת אשר לו, לקח, verse 12, ולקח מלוא המחטאת ככלי אש מעל המזבח מלפני יהוה, מלוא חפניו קטורת סמים דקה והביא מבית לפרוכת. verse 13, ונתן את הקטורת על האש לפני יהוה, הכסה ענן הקטורת את הכפורת אשר על העדות ולא ימות. verse 14, ולקח מדם הפר זעם ואצבעו על פני הכפורת, קדמה ולפני הכפורת יזה 7 פעמים מן הדם באצבעו. verse 15, ושחט את שעיר החטאת אשר לעם והביא את דמו okay, no, there's no problem. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay, got it. Got it. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. Mm, right. So this word here doesn't actually mean to sacrifice. This word means to bring forth, to set before. I'm just so used to it being used in especially in modern Hebrew. The word lahakriv means to sacrifice, because usually you bring it forth before you sacrifice it. That I just naturally interpreted it as sacrifice. So it doesn't. Okay. I got it. I found the error of my ways. Oh, thank God, I found the error of my ways. Okay, so right. So what this is saying, verse 20, is Wakila michaper et kodesh wa et ohel moed. So he finishes, or he's now finished gaining atonement for the Holy of Holies, the tent of meeting, the altar of sacrifice. And he brings forth the living goat. Right. So there were two goats. There was a lot done, a lot drawn to see which one is going to be sacrificed to Yahweh and which one is going to be left alive to be sent out to Azazel, sent out into the wilderness. And this is the one that is now left alive, that's going to be sent out to Azazel, to the wilderness. And so it's now brought forth. Okay, verse 21. Let's break this up into two verselets. Yes, they're officially called versets, but I like to call them verselets. Sounds cooler. Verselet sounds better than verset. There's the etnach. Hey, where'd you hide my etnach? Masoretz, where did you hide my etnach? All right. Okay. It's very weird. I think this is the first verse I've ever seen that I cannot identify an etnach. Maybe it's just a error in the website version here. Okay, I don't know. Oh, there it is. All right. So let's break it up into two. Verse 21. V'samach Aaron et shtei yadao. So Aaron will rest his Aaron, meaning again the Kohen Gadol, will rest his. Whenever you see Aaron, there's the phrase Aaron that always means the Kohen Gadol, and the sons of Aaron, Bnei Aaron, that always means the lay Kohanim. Okay, in this case, it's actually Aaron, and the Bnei Aaron are actually the sons of Aaron. But later, when it's extrapolated to later generations, it means the Kohen Gadol. So who takes over for Aaron as the Kohen Gadol? It's his third-born son, Elazar, as we shall see later on in the Torah, because the first two sons, as we saw in Leviticus chapter 10, Nadav and Avihu, died when they brought unwarranted incense. Okay. Samach Aaron et shtei yadao al rosh se'ir achai. So Aaron shall rest his two hands on the head of the goat that was left alive, the living goat. Vitvada alau et kol awanot bnei Israel, and he shall confess upon it or over it. I think here it literally means over it, because his hands are on top of the head and he's standing over it. So he shall confess over it all of the transgressions, all of the iniquities. I think they should translate this, of iniquities, avonot, of the children of Israel, and all of their transgressions. The chol chatotam. Okay. So Aaron is going to rest his two hands on the head of the living goat, and now he's going to confess over this goat. He's going to confess all of the sins of Israel. So I don't know exactly how that works. He's going to say maybe something like Yahweh, I know that your people Israel are far from perfect. They've made mistakes. They've sinned. They've transgressed. They've done all kinds of things, and I'm now transferring what he's basically doing. Just like when a person who brings a sacrifice, a regular sacrifice, not a regular sacrifice, but one of the sacrifices that we saw in the earlier chapters of Leviticus, he places his hand on the animal, and in doing so, transfers his sin over to the sin of the animal, and then the animal is killed. In this case, the animal is not going to be killed. The goat is not going to be killed. It's going to be sent off into the wilderness, into the desert, with the sins of Israel upon it. Okay, so he's going to vitvada allow. So he's going to pray over it. He's going to confess over it all of the iniquities of the children of Israel and all of their transgressions and all of their sins. Okay, so if I were a rabbi, which I thank my lucky stars I am not. That's a line from one of my favorite movies, Wall Street. Hold on a second. I'm just gonna turn on some light here. One sec. And I think I could turn off the fan now and maybe even the air conditioner. Let's turn it down. 1 second, please. Okay, so okay, so if I were a rabbi, I would say, well, avanot. Okay, so let me translate this again. Okay, so literally, the way it's literally translated here is he's going to confess over it all of the iniquities and the transgressions and the sins of Israel. So I, as a rabbi, if I were a rabbi, I'd try to pick apart, oh, what do transgressions mean, and what is sin, and what do iniquities mean, and what do transgressions mean, and what do sins mean? And the rabbis like to do this. So they'll say Chukim means one thing and Mishpatim means another thing. They'll usually translate it. I don't want to get into it. The point being that this is really the Torah's way of just, again, we've always said many times that repetition means emphasis. It's the Torah's way of saying everything wrong that Israel has done. So it would be maybe in English of saying something like, I'm going to, good analogy here. I don't know, I can't think of a good analogy, but basically it's the Torah's way of using repetition to create emphasis. It basically means everything that Israel has done wrong, and counterproductive and incorrect, in my opinion, to start picking apart the iniquities, and pish'ahim, and transgressions, and chatotam, and sins means, because they're synonyms. In this case, they're synonyms. The Torah uses repetition, synonymic repetition to create emphasis. Okay, so it'd be like saying, I don't know, let me think of I don't know, if you're 16 years old and your parents say you cannot go to the beach today, and you say, I'm going to the beach, I'm going to the sand, I'm going to the water. Okay, yes, beach, sand, and water all mean three different things, but that's not the purpose of that sentence. The purpose of that sentence is to say, like, I'm walking out of this house and I'm going to the beach, right? It's emphasis. It's using things that are, in that case, it's not really synonymous, but that are closely related in order to create the effect of emphasis. Okay, and that's exactly what the Torah is doing here. I hope that makes sense. So, if we were to look at a rabbinical translation, they would pick apart, what does it mean that he atoned over the iniquities, and then they have a whole list of what it means, or which bad things qualifies iniquities, and what does it mean their pish'ahim, their transgressions, pish'ahim. Then there would be a whole list of what that means, and the same for chatotam. But that's not what the Torah is doing here. The Torah is using language to create emphasis. So basically, what the Torah is saying is that Aaron is going to rest his hands over this goat that's going to be sent out into the desert, and he's confessing everything, every last thing that the children of Israel might have done. He's confessing over this goat and then sending it out into the desert. And that's here. Natan otam al rosh sa'ir, and he transfers them onto the head of the goat. Wa shilach biad ish Karite hamidbara, and he sends it, and he v'shilach biad ish Karite, and he sends it out, or he casts it out, or he let me translate this one. Natan otam al rosh sa'ir, and he transfers these iniquities, transgressions, and sins onto the head of the goat. V'shilach biad ish iti, and he sends it with, along with, he places it in the hands of a slow person. No, that's a joke. It doesn't mean slow person. For those of you who know Hebrew, you'll get the joke. If you don't worry about it. He transfers it into the person of, I think, Robert. This is again what they like to call a crux. Nobody knows exactly what this means. We'll get to Robert Alter's translation in a second. A man of the times, out into the desert, or a man selected for that particular role out into the desert, right? So the sins are transferred onto the head of this goat, and then there's another person, not the Kohen Gadol, right? It's the Kohen Gadol that's sitting and transferring the sins onto the head of the goat. And then there's another person there who's selected for this particular role that now chases, or maybe leads and then chases the goat out into the desert with all of the sins of Israel upon it. And let's get a Robert Alter on that one. So he translates as a man for the hour. The Hebrew ish iti is a celebrated crux, meaning nobody really knows what it means. The expression only appears only here. The literal sense is a timely man, and it probably indicates a man chosen to serve for this time and task. That's exactly the way I understand it as well. It's a man designated to do, or chosen for this particular task. Okay. All right. Verse 22. When Asa Hasir allow et kol avnotam el eretz gizera, Washilach et Hasir bamidbar, and the goat shall carry upon itself, shall bear upon itself of the iniquities and transgressions and sins. It just says iniquities. So if I were a rabbi and I want to say, well, before I transferred all of the iniquities and the transgressions and the sins onto the head of the goat, but now only the iniquities are going out into the desert. What happened to the transgressions and the sins? And then I come up with some complicated explanation, blah, 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 blah. And this is why the rabbis are a bunch of idiots. It's just, these are saying the same thing. It's just that, again, the three words, iniquities, transgressions, and sins, are just to create that emphasis. So now these sins, okay, these iniquities, which encapsulates all of what Am Yisrael, what the people of Israel have done incorrectly, El Eretz Gezerah, into a land that is not settled, an unsettled land, meaning a wilderness, uninhabited. Myself. Interesting. Okay. All right. So to a cut-off land, or an unsettled land, a land that's cut off from civilization, v'shilach et ha'seir bamidbar, and he sends the goat out into the wilderness, into the desert. All right. Any questions? Any comments? Geez, where did everyone go? Oh my God. Verse 23. Let's go on. Uba Aaron el ohel moed, and now Aaron comes to the meeting, the pashat et birdei habad, and he takes off his linen clothing, meaning these white clothes that are typical of a lay kohen. Excuse me. Again, with the fan. Shelavash b'vo el kodesh v'hinicham sham. So Aaron comes to the tent of meeting and takes off these clothes, and I don't think it means inside the tent of meeting. It probably means outside, right outside the tent of meeting, and he takes off these linen clothes, which he used to do all of these rituals, and he leaves them there. He lays them there. Verse 24. And he washes his flesh, meaning he washes his entire body in water, makom kadosh, in a holy place. ולבש את בגדיו ויצא ועשה את עולתו ואת עולת העם וכיפר בעדו בעד העם. I'm not sure, this is a bit confusing. Maybe it does mean, let me just read this again. Ba'aron el on ma'od pashat begadim ba. Abad asher lavash bevo'o el kodesh v'yinecham sham. Let's see if we can get a translation of this. No. I want to figure this out myself because it does seem to imply. Let me read this again. Rachatz et besaro b'mayim b'makom kadosh, ravash et bigadao, v'yetza v'asa et olato wa et olat ha'am v'chiper ba'ado va'ad ha'am. So it seems that this is saying he actually goes into the tent of meeting, takes off his clothes in the tent of meeting, bathes in the tent of meeting, and then puts his regular clothes back on, and then comes back out to do the burnt offerings. I'd like to get a little translation or a little commentary on this. Let's go to, we can go to our commentaries here. So this is Leviticus 16, verse 23. Okay, so Elikat's commentary for English readers shall come into the tabernacle of the congregation, better shall come into the tent of meeting. That's literally what it says. This was the fourth time that the high priest entered into the Holy of Holies on the Day of Atonement. The object of his going into the most holy was to fetch the censer and the incense cup which he had left between the two staves, in Leviticus 16:12. To do this, he had again to bathe, which always accompanied the change of garments, and to put on his white robes. As it was no part of the actual service, but was simply a necessary act subsequent to the service, it is not fully described in the text. This was the last act on the Day of Atonement, which the high priest performed in his white robes. That doesn't make sense to me. Benson commentary: he shall put off his linen garments, having finished the solemn expiatory and deprecatory offering. He was to put off those garments which were appropriated to the service and leave them there. Maimonides and others say they were never to be used more, either by him. That's irrelevant. This is just preachy stuff. Aaron shall come into the tabernacle of the congregation, shall put off the linen garments. On the dismissal of the scapegoat, the high priest prepared for the important parts of the service which still remained, and for the performance of these he laid aside his plain linen clothes, and having bathed himself in water, he assumed his pontifical dress. Thus gorgeously attired, he went to the offerings which were prescribed for him, and the people, consisting of the two red, had been brought with the sin offerings, but reserved until now. The fat was ordered to be, etc. Second, and Aaron shall come into the tabernacle of the congregation, having been into the most holy place a fourth time, as the Jews say, to fetch. No, that's just rabbinical nonsense. Jachi from the Rabbin says the whole section is in its order. One more. Okay, I don't know. Do one more. The high priest now removed the special garments in which he had performed the service of the day, and after again washing, put on the usual high priestly garments and offered the burnt offerings. So I don't know. It seems I'm not getting really an answer here, but it seems like yes, he's actually. I gotta turn on the air conditioning. My God, temperature problems. It's getting too hot and too cold and too hot and too cold. Okay. I don't know. That's what it seems. El Ohel Moed. He comes into the tent of meeting. So again, it seems like he's doing this inside this area here, or maybe even in the Holy of Holies. I don't know. I'm gonna have to leave this as a question for another time, and we'll just move on. At any rate, he changes. He washes himself. He takes off these linen garments, these white linen garments, washes his body, bathes his body, and then goes back into his regular Kohen garments. And it seems he's doing this inside the tent of meeting, either in the Holy of Holies. I can't believe that. I guess in this area here. I don't know. I have questions about this, but I'm just going to leave it for now. Verse 25. So he's going to throw the fats from the sin offering onto the altar of sacrifice, so that it goes up in smoke. So the fats we know always go onto the altar of sacrifice. The fats, the forbidden fats, are always God's food. Verse 26. And the one who accompanied the goat or sent the goat out into the to Azazel, he washes his clothes and bathes himself in water, and then he can come back into the camp. So he goes out into the desert with this goat. Then before he comes back into the camp, he has to bathe himself and change his clothes. I'm sorry, he has to wash his clothes and bathe himself. And I think the reason for that is he's now accompanied this goat. This goat is carrying all the sins of Israel out into the desert. So somehow he's, been affected by these sins. He's become sinned up. Or maybe it's just the fact that maybe it's a bit more mundane, just the fact that he was outside of the camp. Maybe he somehow attracted some kind of ritual impurity. No, that doesn't make sense because he would then have to probably wait until the evening. I think it's just symbolic to say he's washing off all the sins that he had been on the goat, which he accompanied out into the desert to send away. Okay, verse 27. ואת פרחתת ואת שעיר החטאת אשר הובא את דמם לכפר בקודש יוציא אל מחוץ למחנה ושרפו באש את אורותם ואת בשרם ואת פרשם. So remember, there were two sin offerings. Again, we're calling sin offering a recompense for inadvertent transgression offering, but we'll just call it sin offering here. So there were two sin offerings. There was one which was a bull, that was for Aaron and his family, and there was one that was a goat, that was for all of the children of Israel. So these sin offerings, their blood, remember, was gathered and was sprinkled on the kaporet, on the cover of the Ark of the Covenant. And then, if I remember correctly, then the blood from both of these offerings was then taken, more of the blood was then taken out to the altar of sacrifice, rubbed on the corners of the altar of sacrifice, and then sprinkled on the altar of sacrifice. And now what happens to these sin offerings? So their fat is burned on the altar. We just saw that. And now the rest of them, so that now they're brought outside of the camp and they're burned in the fire. Or what's burned in the fire? Their skin, their flesh, and their entrails. Okay, so I'm trying to remember back when we learned about the sin offering. I believe that's what happens with the regular sin offering. We'd have to go back and check, but I'm not going to do it right now. So the sin offering, because it's a bad offering, right? It's recompense for transgressions. It's not eaten. And I believe, if I remember correctly, when we learned about the sin offerings, that's what happens with sin offerings, that their flesh, their skin, their flesh, and their entrails are taken out and they're burned outside the camp on the dung heap, on the ash heap. Not the dung heap. Okay. So in other words, if I remember correctly, these sin offerings are now just getting the regular treatment that any sin offering would get. Verse 28. And the person who burns them also then shall wash his clothing, bathe his flesh, bathe his body in water, and afterwards he can come back into the camp. And that might be, again, the same rules as we saw in the regular sin offering. I'd have to go back and check, but I'm not going to do it now. Okay. Any questions, any comments? Anybody? All right, let's go on. Verse 29, and let's get a little Robert Alter commentary. No, there is no Robert Alter commentary there, so we can go on to verse 29. So, so this shall be an eternal statute for you. Meaning, what shall be an eternal statute? All of this entire ritual, the atonement of the Holy of Holies, for the altar sacrifice, for the tabernacle in general. Okay, this shall be an eternal statute for you. B'chodesh Ashvi'i Basol HaChodesh, on in the 7th month, on the 10th of the month. Ta'anu et nafshotechem, you shall afflict your souls, afflict yourselves. And if you look at my article on Karaite Insights, you'll see why I believe that this means to fast. Okay, let me see if I can find that article. So Yom HaKippurim. Causing oneself to suffer. So if you go to this article here, I'll post the link in the comments. Okay, and there's a section called causing oneself to suffer, and I won't go through it right now, but it explains why I think that that phrase means fasting. Okay, and it might even and also fasting from refraining from drinking water, I believe. Okay, v'chol melacha lo ta'asu ha'ezrach ha'ger gar b'tochachem, and neither the native born or the ger that dwells among you shall do any melacha, shall do any kind of unnecessary work on that day, on the 7th day of the 10th month. I'm sorry, the 10th day of the 7th month. Verse 30. Because on that day you will gain atonement, or it shall be atoned for you. This is a typical. So literally, it says it will atone for you, or atone regarding you or upon you. But this is a typical. This is a typical Hebrew construct where the active is meant to use the passive, or is meant to imply the passive. So, in other words, it's like saying in English, what's an example? They can't go into that house. Okay, who's they? The they is meant in general, but really what it means is that that house cannot be entered into by anybody, and that's the implication here. Yechaper lechem. So you shall gain atonement, or atonement shall be given to you. The taher etchem, to purify you, literally to return you to a state of ritual purity. Mikol chatotechem, from all of your transgressions, lifnei Yahweh titaru, from all of your transgressions before Yahweh, you shall be purified. So I have to plug in a second, but basically what we see here is once again that the emphasis of Yom HaKippurim is purification, and the focus is not purification from mundane sins, although one can imply that when the Kohen Gadol rests, when the Kohen Gadol rests his hands over the goat that goes to Azazel and confesses all of the sins of Israel, that includes everything. If Israel stole, if Israel spoke richilut, if they gossiped, all of these horrible things. But really, the focus here, we could see with the Day of Atonement, is not about common sins that one commits day in and day out, but it's about sins regarding the inadvertent, or sins regarding sins that may have caused the inadvertent codifying, or the inadvertent ritual impurification of the tabernacle / temple sanctuary. And that's the language implies that here. Okay. Because on that day it will be atoned for you, or you will gain atonement for all of these things you've done, to ritually purify you, or to purify you from all of your inadvertent transgressions. Before Yahweh, you shall become pure. You shall be purified. And that's the language of ritual purification and ritual impurification. Verse 31. Shabbaton lachem. It shall be a solemn day of rest, which is like a Shabbat. We could speak a lot about this, but I'm not going to get into it right now. So the only things in the Torah, the only things in the Torah which are given the title Shabbat are the seventh day of the week, Shabbat, which we're celebrating right now. Yom HaKippurim is also called the Shabbat, and the seventh agricultural, what they now call the Shemitah year, the seventh year in Leviticus chapter 25, which we'll get to soon, where the land rests every seventh year and no planting takes place, no planting, no reaping, nothing. Okay, the land rests every seventh year. That's also called the Shabbat. So there are other things that are called Shabbaton, which means a day of resting, but the title day of rest is only given to those three things: the seventh day of the week, Yom Kippurim, and the seventh agricultural year. So this is a Shabbat, Shabbaton. So this is Shabbat, which is a day of resting. Again, notice the repetition: Shabbat, Shabbaton. So Shabbaton means, I guess, something like a Shabbat, but it's not a Shabbat unless it uses the word Shabbat. So it's a very solemn day of resting is the way it's often translated, because the emphasis, right? You shall certainly rest, right? An absolute day of resting, a solemn day of resting. Hilachem, it is to you, and you shall afflict yourselves, again, which I believe means to fast, to not eat food or drink water. Chukat olam, it's an eternal statute. V'chiper hakohen asher yimshach oto, v'asher yimale et yado lekahen tachat avihu, lavash et bigdei habad, bigdei hakodesh. And so this is saying that the Kohen who takes the place of the Kohen Gadol, in other words, after Aaron dies, there's Eleazar and so on and so forth, that any Kohen who serves as the Kohen Gadol, he shall perform this ritual even after Aaron is dead. Okay, so literally, the Kohen which you shall, or who shall be anointed, shall perform this ritual of atonement. Vasher, who shall be anointed, Vasher Yimale et Yado lekahen tachat avihu, and he who shall assume the office of the chief Kohen, of the Kohen Gadol, in place of his father. Lavash et bigdei abad, bigdei hakodesh. He shall be the one who puts on these special linen clothes on this Day of Atonement, on this Yom Kippurim, these holy clothes. Okay, so basically, what this verse is saying in a nutshell is that after Aaron dies, then another Kohen Gadol, another chief Kohen is appointed, and so on and so forth. And that chief Kohen is always the one who puts on these special linen clothes, because all the other times the Kohen Gadol is not wearing linen clothes; he's wearing his full, glorious Kohanic outfit. But on the 10th day of the 7th month, he's wearing these special linen clothes, and so whoever takes over for him as the Kohen Gadol down through the generations shall also be the one to perform this ritual and wear these special linen clothes that the Kohen Gadol never wears, except on this day, on the 10th day of the 7th month. Verse 33, et mikdash hakodesh, and he shall atone for, in other words, this Kohen who takes over for the Kohen Gadol throughout the generations, whoever is the Kohen Gadol throughout the generations, shall atone for the holy sanctuary, vet Ohel Moed. Mikdash HaKodesh means clearly here, it's like the Kodesh Kedoshim, the Holy of Holies, meaning, close this out, meaning this area here where the Ark of the Covenant is. Vet Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting. Oh, I've got to plug in. Oh, geez, I have to plug in right now. Hold on. I'm not going to stop or anything. Just give me a chance here to plug in. Oh boy, how are we going to do this quick before the battery runs out? Well, if it does, I'll just come back. I think we can do it. Just give me a second, please. I'm going to plug in. Okay. One second. All right, we're plugged in. Let's see. This. 1 second, please. Okay, so things around there. That here there. Okay, וכיפר את מקדש הקודש ואת אוהל מועד ואת המזבח יכפר. So he's gonna atone for what? For the Holy of Holies, the entire tent of meeting, for the altar of sacrifice, the ala kohanim, and for the kohanim. And this clarifies what it means by himself and his household. It means here, we get a clarification, it means the kohanim. Doesn't just mean his immediate household. V'kol am hakahal yichaper, and the entire congregation of the people he shall atone for. Verse 34, Vaitazot lechem. Oh, that. Right, one more second, forgot the thing that I was resting the computer on. One more second, please. I need a studio engineer. Verse 34. Better. Vatazot lechem lechukat olam, and this shall be for you an eternal statute, lechaper al ben Israel, to gain atonement for the children of Israel, mikol chatotam, from all of their sins, achat b'shana, one time every year, once a year, ya'as ka'asher tziwa Yahweh et Moshe, and he did as Yahweh commanded Moshe. Who did? Well, in order to know that, we have to go all the way back up to the beginning of the chapter. Right here, verses 1 and 2. Verse 1 says, Vidaber Yahweh el Moshe, Yahweh spoke to Moses, Achrei mot shnei bnei Aaron, after the death of the two sons of Aaron, Bekar vatam lifnei Yahweh v'yamutu, when they brought an unsanctioned, or when they brought an offering before Yahweh and were put to death. Verse 2, V'yomer Yahweh el Moshe, and Yahweh said to Moses, Daber el Aharon achicha, speak to Aaron your brother, Al Yavo, and then we go into all of the ritual. So that's what it's speaking about. So Yahweh spoke to Moses after the death of Aaron's two sons, and then he told Moses to tell Aaron all of these laws. And so when all the way we get down here, and it says, Ya'as kashet tziva Yahweh et Moshe, and he did exactly as Yahweh commanded Moses. Who did? Aaron. Because Yahweh told Moses to tell Aaron, this is what you're going to do. So when it says here, he did, it's referring back to Aaron. So this is the way the Torah works, right? This wouldn't, I mean, I guess it would kind of fly in English, but in biblical Hebrew, this is very typical, that now we have a reference back to something all the way many verses before, okay? And if we were thinking kind of along our modern Western English ways, this wouldn't make sense. We'd be like, who are you talking about? Who did? But this is very common for the Torah to have a kind of clarifying or repetitive phrase that's very distant from the original phrase, and that's what we see here. And so in order to understand it, we have to take this whole chapter. Again, these chapters are laid out much later by the Christians, but it doesn't matter. This whole section, we'll call it, and understand that when it says here that he did as Yahweh commanded Moses, that we have to go all the way back to the beginning and understand that speaking about Aaron, who did what Yahweh commanded Moses, because Yahweh spoke to Moses and said, tell Aaron to do all of these things. And this also acts kind of as a summary sentence. Well, a lot of these closing verses here act as summary sentences, and that's typically the way the Torah works. There's an introductory verses, then we get the details, and then we get kind of a summary, and then we get kind of summary and closing sentences, which kind of summarize everything and kind of tie up the two ends of that set of laws, like bookends, and that's what we have here. Okay, and with that, we've finished Leviticus chapter 16. I find it absolutely fascinating. I hope you do too. Hello, love, Yah. And next time we'll go on to Leviticus chapter 17. Let's just get a preview. And this is going to be a very interesting chapter. This is going to be talking more about, well, as it says here, the place of the sacrifice. We'll speak about that next week, and the eating of blood, and we'll see some very interesting things there as well. Okay, so any comments, any questions before we leave off for the day? If not, then I will close it up for the day. I thank you all for joining me, and I wish you a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov wherever you are in the world. And Be'ezrat Yahweh, we'll pick it up again next week. Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov.
עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. אוי 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 שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם עושה שמיים וארץ, אני אתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. אוי 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 שיר למעלות.